In this video, I'll tell you about so-called hobby tourists and how they really don't exist. I try to stay away from Twitter. I really do, I usually just kind of post things on there that I need to post when I'm going to go live on Twitch or when a new video comes out, stuff like that. And I admittedly do follow people on Twitter, mostly artists, if I'm honest, but I try to stay away from doom scrolling. However, sometimes you open the app and you're on the For You tab instead of the Following tab. That's how they get you. You can't turn off the For You tab, and sometimes it just defaults back to it. I don't know. Anyway, I saw someone get called a hobby tourist again. Hobby tourist is a stupid term. Tourism is a hobby in itself. Actually, it usually refers to travel and going places you've never been to experience the area and learn more about it and whatnot. You probably aren't planning on moving there. You're just checking out the area and the culture. That's the hobby of travel and tourism. But trying out a new hobby isn't tourism, it's just being a beginner. If you decide to poke your head into a hobby, like wargaming, but it could be any hobby, and you sort of look around to see what it's like, you might find that it becomes your hobby. Or maybe you don't and you move on. That's how all of us started in the wargaming hobby. We first learned about it somehow, maybe from a friend or something we saw at a gaming convention or who knows what, right? And then it piqued our interest. We started kind of trying to learn more and then got into it more. If you had looked into wargaming as a hobby and it didn't appeal to you, well, then chances are you're not watching this video, right? It's kind of like visiting a strange country and then liking it so much and deciding to move there, right? That's what looking into new hobbies can be like. But the idea that people get involved in a hobby with no intention of staying if they like it is ridiculous. The term hobby tourist, it isn't a real thing, it's a pejorative. It's a word that expresses contempt or disapproval. People call other people hobby tourists because they disagree with that person. Pure and simple. Whatever they might be saying, they disagree with it. Sure, they'll say things like, well, you've not been in the hobby long enough, you're just a tourist. But if they agreed with what that person was saying, they probably wouldn't say, well, I agree with your point of view, but you haven't been in the hobby long enough, so I'll disagree with you. It's just not the way that these things work. Hobbies are for fun. That's why we do them. I feel like sometimes people forget that, right? Maybe you've just started, or, maybe you've been on again, off again, for years. Maybe wargaming is one of your many different hobbies, so you don't spend tons of time on it because there's only so many hours in the day. None of this matters. Again, we're doing this for fun. No one needs to call out another hobbyist on their commitment to the hobby during a discussion. It's not that serious. In the real world, I don't want my doctor to be a medical hobbyist. That stuff is much more serious than toy soldiers, games, and made-up stories. So where does this concept of the hobby tourist come from? Well, it's basically a conspiracy theory that some folks like to believe. They believe that these hobby tourists are people out there who don't buy or build or paint or collect or play or read or do anything wargaming, but yet somehow these people are making a lot of noise in the industry, mainly via social media, about the way that they want things to be. Maybe it's inclusivity, maybe it's politics, whatever. But these folks can allegedly steer the big companies in wargaming to do whatever it is that they want, to follow their hobby tourist agenda. In actuality, the big corporations in wargaming, and let's just be honest, it's pretty much mostly Games Workshop, they don't listen to the opinions of paying customers, let alone, weird randos on the internet. Show of hands, just everybody, anyone raise your hand if you requested another price hike this year in Games Workshop product. No? That's weird. Okay, well, did a lot of people complain about it on the internet, the price hike? Yes, they did, including this guy. Did Games Workshop listen and not do that? No, they didn't. And they didn't listen the last 5 or 10 price hikes that I can remember either. The only thing that they listen to is sales, not opinions. That's how massive corporations work. Huge corporations with shareholders do everything that they do to make more money. If they don't believe that a change will increase profit, then they just won't do it. When a massive corporation decides to embrace something like inclusivity, for example, it's not really because they think it's the right thing. People in the organization individually might, but the organization itself doesn't think it's necessarily the right thing. It is the right thing, in my opinion, frankly, but the corporation, they know that including more people into the potential, customer base means more potential sales and more potential profit. It's a simple business equation, honestly. If someone calls you a hobby tourist online, or like maybe even in person, I suppose, but that's way less likely, then just know that they simply disagree with you and want to try to degrade the validity of your opinion by saying you're not a true wargamer, you're just a tourist, right? Like, they don't have anything substantial to reply with to your point, so instead, they decided to judge your commitment to the hobby. It's basically an ad hominem attack, and it's usually pretty easy to spot, and it should be pretty easy to ignore as well. And your commitment to the hobby? Again, it's a hobby, a leisure activity, not life and death. Who gets to judge whether you're serious enough about it or not, right? There's always someone who does more in the hobby than you do. In most situations, that person is probably Vince Venturella. That's most likely the case. So everyone's on a different hobby journey, I'd love to know what the cutoff is between hobby tourist and serious hobbyist. I'll bet there's not anything near a clear definition. What if you've read all of the lore, but you've never painted a model? Or, you've painted hundreds of models, but you've never played. I've been called a hobby tourist. My first miniatures game was Battletech in the mid-1980s, nearly 40 years ago. I've painted thousands of models, played hundreds of games, made over 800 videos about how to get into wargaming here on the channel over the last 11 years, and have designed multiple games, wargame sets, that have been selling pretty well. The most recent ones with the aforementioned Vince Venturella. I've basically made wargaming my job. But still, I've been called a hobby tourist because some people just don't agree with what I have to say. And if it's not clear, calling someone a hobby tourist is a real kind of gatekeeper kind of activity. A gatekeeper is someone who decides it's up to them who does or does not have access to a community or rights to an identity, right? Gatekeepers can harm the growth of a community even though they think they're saving it somehow for the non-tourists. Pretty much every hobby I can think of is better off when it brings in more people as opposed to fewer. So the concept of, keeping the wrong people out is really problematic, obviously. The great thing about the wargaming hobby is that you have all the control. If rules change in your favorite game in a way that you don't like, whether you blame the alleged tourists or not, you and your gaming group who don't agree with that new rule can continue to just play it the old way. Or you can play an older version of the game that you prefer more. If you don't agree with the way that a company is handling itself, stop buying from them. Vote with your wallet. They're more likely to notice that than they will some angry posts on social media. As I said, hobby tourists are a conspiracy theory, propagated by people who disagree with others, but can't properly elucidate why they disagree. If you don't agree with things that are happening in your hobby, don't attack other hobbyists. Be the change you want to see. Vote with your wallet. Find like-minded players in your area and play with those folks, and maybe even make your own wargame rules the way that you believe wargames should be. But dismissing and driving hobbyists out of the hobby that you say that you love does nothing but hurt the hobby. If you like this video, I'd appreciate if you click the like button down there below. If you'd like to see more videos like this every single Friday, I talk about all kinds of things, but mostly about how to get into the hobby, how to think about it, and sometimes some paint tutorials. Click the subscribe button down there. It's free. Thanks for watching.